us here, and it is time. So we're going to get started. So for those of you joining, thank you for joining us. So Dr. Alyson Nerenberg is our presenter now. You can download her slides on the Dr. Alyson Nerenberg in the blue bar right above her head. She's going to present on letting go of the illusion of perfection in our relationships, which is, it's such a great topic. And we were just talking that I've known Alyson for 14 years. I met her the first week that I joined a different job, and she was on the advisory board, and I had the pleasure of getting to know her. And so we've stayed in contact on some level, but she's a therapist in Pennsylvania, has had a career. She's just written a book. And so we were talking about how exciting that is, that, we'll hope to see that in the next few months. But I'm grateful that she's here talking about this particular topic, because I think with addicts, we're like, if we don't do it perfectly, then why do it at all? So perfectionism is such a challenging topic, but anyway, so I'm going to mute, and you can follow along on our slides. I will say, if you, this is not a typical meeting, this is recorded. So if you go to people requesting to share, it's nothing personal, but I'm going to X you out. If you have questions, because she's going to have time at the end for questions, message them to me, and I will ask them of Alyson afterwards. So you hit the chat a feature, and I will ask them. So I'm going to toggle off my, so that dogs barking in the background don't get heard. So
great. Thanks, Tammy. So I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for the introduction, Tammy. I'm happy to be here, but I want to do a full disclosure for you. I want to share with you that I'm really nervous about being here. I think I'm nervous for a number of reasons. One, because that's the topic I'm talking about. This is a topic that's so near and dear to my heart that I care really deeply about it, and I want to make sure I'm doing a good job. So there's that part. I just finished writing this book a couple of months ago. So when you first asked me to talk about it, I hesitated. I thought, maybe I'm not ready. Maybe in like September, I'll be in a great place for this. And then I thought, what's really going on? And what's really going on was I was worried that I wasn't going to be good enough. That here I'd be in the rooms chat with all of you, and that I wouldn't be good enough. And then I thought how ridiculous that is. Here's my topic, letting go of the illusion of perfection. And I'm worried that I'm not going to be perfect enough. So what I do is, whenever I'm feeling anxious or not sure of myself, I think, what would I tell my patients? And what I would tell my patients is progress, not perfection. I tell them that showing up is 90% of the battle. Just the fact that I'm here is great. Then I would tell them, bring the body, the mind will follow. And I'd use lots of great recovery slogans. But if that still didn't work, I'd refer back to the psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott. Now, I first learned about Dr. Donald Winnicott when I was in the early 90s, when I was in grad school. And I really only remember one thing that he said. What I remember about Donald Winnicott is he talked about the good enough mother. And what he said is, for a child to thrive, not just survive, but to actually thrive and do well, he does not need a perfect parent. He just needs a mother who's doing her best, who's showing up, who, when she makes a mistake, apologizes and tries to do better next time. That child does not need perfection. So I loved this way back in the 90s. And so what I did was I really transferred it. I thought, if there's such a thing as a good enough mother, couldn't there be such a good thing as a good enough student, a good enough grad student? Doesn't need to get straight A's, but can show up for class and learn as much as she can. Couldn't there be a good enough therapist who might not always be perfectly eloquent and articulate, but who her patients know really care about them and is going to show up week after week and do her best? This year, I learned that I could be a good enough writer. Instead of waiting for that moment where I actually felt like I knew exactly what I wanted to write, I just was going to start writing, do my best. And today, I am going to be the good enough speaker. So regardless if I haven't spoken on this topic yet before, here I am. I'm showing up and doing my best. So that's such a principle for this. When I think about it that there's why I wrote this book. I think about it and I think about partially my husband shamed me. He said to me, "You've been talking your whole life about writing this book, about writing. And if you don't do it now in a pandemic, when are you ever going to write?" So instead of waiting for the perfect moment, I just started writing. When I looked at some of the literature on perfectionism, I know there's a lot out there. There's Brene Brown, who talks about the gifts of imperfection. There's this Steve Guys, who looks at all the negative tapes that run in our head when we're trying to be perfect. There's also a lot of books out there looking at couples therapy. So there's Harville Hendricks, Getting the Love You Want, John Gottman. There's even this Sue Johnson on emotionally focused therapy. So many schools of knowledge. But there's nothing that really combines what happens when we expect our partners to be perfect. What happens when we expect our children to be perfect? So I wanted to really address that today, looking about the expectations we put on others to be perfect. And I wanted to start off in the slides, it talks about why are we expecting perfection? And my first slide talks about it's our culture of perfection. Even when we're little kids, we hear about Disney princesses and fairy tales, happy endings. And if you look at Disney princess stories, they're all pretty similar. There's this poor, misunderstood girl working, cleaning the house, being misunderstood by her stepmother and her family members. And then she meets this Prince Charming who whisks her away. She has to overcome a few obstacles, but then she gets to go off to the castle with him and live happily ever after. Well, there's no talk about what happens after she moves into the castle. Does she live with her in-laws? Does she have to deal with environmental problems like a pandemic? There's no talk about any of that. It's just that happy ever ending. So we all look for that perfection. Even our TV shows. In the 90s, there was Seinfeld, where Jerry Seinfeld would constantly date and look at all the flaws with the women he would date. There was that double dipper, the woman who put her chips in the dip twice, definitely a reason to break up. Then there was the close talker, definitely reason to end the relationship before it gets closer, before there's intimacy. Then you look at shows like Sex and the City, which I loved. But here you have 4 glamorous Manhattanites who are living in New York City with these great apartments, wonderful clothes. And while they're getting together for dinner, all they're talking about is perfect love and what's wrong with the men they're dating. We've even taken our desire to find perfection and made it into a competition. Look at The Bachelor. We have 20 women who are competing to win the attention of the bachelor. They have to be pretty enough, cool enough, have great conversation skills and great clothes. Then they switched the tapes and had the man being the bachelor, having the bachelorette. So the men would compete to show who's the most successful, handsome, articulate, who is good enough to win the attention of the woman. Our culture has gone crazy looking for that perfect ideal love. Okay, we also look for perfectionism. It comes from our families. I once went to a presentation for therapists that was done by a therapist, Marilyn Mason. And what she talked about was that person sitting on our couch in front of us, we're not just treating that person. We're treating that person's mother and that person's mother's mother. We're treating that man and his father and his father's father. There's generations of trauma that occur that we are treating. So I'll give my own family life as an example. What that looked like in my family was that I although I had great parents who loved me, I was very lucky and blessed. I also had some struggles. I had a mother who was a worrier, who had a lot of anxiety, and I had a father who was an alcoholic. So, growing up with a mother who is a worrier, a child learns to try and be perfect. She'll give the mother nothing to worry about. For me, the worry had to do with academics. Was she going to be good enough? And so it became not only how did I do in the test, but how did Jennifer do and how did Tammy do? There was that pressure to keep up. And for a while I tried, and then I gave up and said, I'll just be the social one. It wasn't until I went to college when I learned that I really like to learn, and I lit up over psychology. Now, what I didn't realize at the time was that my mother came by her worry pretty honestly. My grandmother was a worrier. My grandmother grew up in the Depression, in a time when she worried about having enough food for her family. She had 4 brothers, and she was the only one who had a job in the family. She worked as a bookkeeper and kept the family fed and helped keep the house over their head. She wasn't able to get married until later because she had to work and take care of the family's finances. So she ended up marrying my grandfather when she was 36 and then had a miscarriage. And then she finally had an only child of my mother when she was in her late 30s, which in those days was considered ancient. So she was very worried about my mother's well-being. Will she get enough food? She be okay? Is she sick? Am I going to lose her? So this generations of worrying went from my grandmother to my mother to me. Now, as many of you know, having a father who's an alcoholic or any alcoholic parent, you learn to try and hide what's going on and make everything look perfect. In my family, the mantra was wash your face, put on lipstick, and never let them see you sweat. Always look good. I became a master at that. I had a patient once who talked about how sitting around in his kitchen, plates were being thrown, words were being yelled, and the phone would ring in the kitchen. That was back in the days when there was one phone for the whole family. And his mother would answer the phone, hello? Without a care in the world, put on that perfect face. So with perfectionism, we have to look good. All of that adds up to a lot of trauma. Now, this is not significant trauma. There's 2 different types of trauma that us psychologists talk about. There's big T trauma and little t trauma. Big T trauma is the trauma that most people think about when they hear the word trauma. That's that if there's something happens of a global nature, like if you're in a war or a plane crash or a car crash, or there's sexual violence that occurs, or that you're held up at gunpoint. This is something that anybody would know is an extraordinary life circumstance. But there's also little t traumas. Now, little t traumas aren't as readily thought about as trauma. They're more of a personal nature. That's if you move a lot as a child and have to constantly start new schools, if you're bullied, if you are picked last for gym class, your parents get a divorce, if you have a loss of a family member. Now, the whole world might not recognize that these are traumas, but to you, they're devastating. And all these little traumas can add up and become cumulative trauma. Now, you know what happens when we have a lot of traumas that add up. We start feeling shame. And I know this crowd knows all about shame, but what I'm going to talk about it is Bradshaw's definition. And I love the fact when he talks about the difference between guilt and shame. He talks about guilt as that core feeling that you made a mistake and you feel bad about it. But shame is more pervasive. It feels like you are a mistake. So the guilt, the shame, it all adds to you wanting to look good, to look perfect, to not let anybody see your core defective sense of yourself, your character defects. And if you're feeling pretty defective, it's much easier to focus on your partner's defects of character than your own. Now, our culture also has another pressure that all of you know about: social media. Instagram, Facebook. It used to be that when a couple got engaged, it was this really sacred, special moment. Two people decide to spend the rest of their life together. It goes well, they talk about it, maybe they call a family member the next day. Nowadays, everything is an Instagram moment. You have to get a dramatic proposal. There has to be pictures taken of the moment. And the pictures have to be either perfectly airbrushed or at least filtered, and then displayed so the world could see your perfect love affair. Even kids going to school, this new generation of parents, they put such pressure on themselves to look perfect. It used to be your kid starts school, you put them on the school bus, you wish them a good first day. Now, the child needs to be dressed to the nines. There needs to be a poster board saying what grade he's going into, what his favorite interests are and hobbies, and the name of his teacher, just to show what a perfect parent you are, getting your child ready for school so well. All this adds up to pressure. Pressure on our spouses, pressure on our partner, and pressure on our children. I don't know if any of you happen to see this documentary. It's called Varsity Blues. It just came out a couple of weeks ago, but it really looked at the Rick Singer and the college scandal. What he talked about was Rick Singer was this college coach that helped people get their kids into the right colleges, the right being Ivy League or prestigious colleges. And he would take a lot of money from people who would pay for him. And he would basically get them to switch the SATs so that they could submit different scores, or pretend they played a varsity sport and get the coaches to get them into the, pretend they're being on the college team to get into these colleges. So America found out about this a couple years ago, and there was an outrage. They even had a couple CEOs that were caught in this. There was Felicity Huffman from Desperate Housewives and Lori Loughlin from Full House, like really famous actresses. Nobody could understand why these actresses who are worth so much money and so successful, it didn't even matter that their kids went to college. Why are they cheating? And they became vilified. They should suffer, they're entitled. I looked at it a little bit differently. I looked at it as a symptom of our culture's expectations of perfection. It starts when our kids are little. It's not enough that your son plays on a soccer team. He needs to play on the travel soccer team. It's not enough that your daughter takes a dance class. She needs to be on a competitive dance team where she travels to different cities. And, oh, is she in the front row? Is she the prima ballerina? Is it dance moms? There's such pressure to have our kids be successful because we look at them as a narcissistic extension of ourselves. In my own life, I had an example of this. I have 3 kids of different ages, my oldest being 21, my youngest 10. And having these kids, they all have varied abilities. My oldest is my most academic, and she was always driven and got herself into a very prestigious Ivy League college. A friend of mine reached out to me who I had lost touch with, and the friend said to me, "Congratulations on your daughter. That's evidence of some damn good parenting." That rubbed me the wrong way. I know she was trying to be nice, but I thought about it, and I thought about my other kids. My middle child was very, very social and got into her own good college, not of that caliber, but does that make me any less of a parent? And then I thought about my youngest. My son has dyslexia. and a reading disability and has real struggles with his own self-esteem. And I thought about it, if he doesn't go to a college of that caliber, if he doesn't even go to college, does that make me any less of a parent? And then I thought about it and I thought actually the opposite. The fact that I'm becoming his champion and getting him tutors and showing up at his IEP meetings and finding him even this year a school that would give him in-person learning and work with him with reading and try to foster his self-esteem, to me, that's way harder. So even if it doesn't look good on paper or look perfect, who knows what it really is? And I think it's more important to raise kids of character and kindness than how things look. All right, I want to go back to romantic relationships. I want to talk about ruptures and repairs. I believe in all of our relationships, there are ruptures and repairs. Ruptures are disappointments, things that don't go well. There are times we have heartbreaks. Those are times that we are let down and betrayed. There could be little betrayals, there could be big betrayals. The work in staying in a relationship is to do the repair work. Now, I'm not talking about superficial apologies. I'm talking about showing empathy, trying to do better, working a 12-step program, making amends, and then changing your behavior over time. This is hard work. So often our divorce rate is so high in this country because people don't want to do the work of repairing. They're looking for when they're hurt, they want to cut and run. One of the questions that I ask patients in a couples therapy session, I actually got it from the S-Anon rooms, but it was like, what have we done that has hurt our relationships this week, and what have we done that have helped our relationships this week? I heard that that's been asked in meetings, and I just thought it was so powerful. So it's basically, when you ask somebody, what have you done that helped your relationship? That really throws people off, because when they come into a session, each person wants to point a finger at the other and say what's wrong in the relationship. But I'm asking them to change the focus to what's right. What is going well in your relationship? What is your strengths? And when I ask them what is wrong, tell me what you could do better, I want to normalize it, that we all have things we could do better. We all have less than ideal moments, and it's not the end of the world when things go wrong. I had a couple that I worked with. We're going through a really harsh time, a lot of heartbreak. There was a sexual indiscretion and an affair. And after a year of doing empathy work and rebuilding, they looked at me with tears in their eyes and they said, how can we ever erase what happened? How can we ever make our relationship perfect again? What I shared with them is an analogy that I hold. It is the analogy of a quilt. And with this quilt, it's basically any long-term relationship. I'm talking about a type of relationship that lasts decades, has some disappointments, has some squares, like in a quilt, that have gray in it, that have blemishes in it, that are dark. The goal isn't to erase the dark square. The goal is to weave a lot of light squares around it. And not to look at the quilt as being imperfect, but to look at the quilt as having character and having light and having beauty in it, despite the fact that there is some darkness in one of the squares. I tell them to envision this quilt and envision them hanging it on their wall so they can honor the sacredness of it and see the beauty of this tapestry that they've woven together. I want to talk about a quote, and it's from a movie that I saw in 2004. It wasn't a particularly great movie, but it was a great quote. The movie was called Shall We Dance? And in it, there was Susan Sarandon and Richard Gere. And Richard Gere was taking dance lessons. And basically, Susan Sarandon didn't know that he was, and she thought he was cheating on her. So she was very suspicious and hired a private investigator. Now, this private investigator had his own motives. He was trying to get with Susan Sarandon. So what he said to her was, if you can't trust him, why stay married? And what she said is, beautiful quote, in a marriage, you are promising to care about everything. The good things, the bad things, the terrible things, the mundane things. All of it, all of the time, every day. You are saying that your life will not go unnoticed because I will notice it. Your life will not go unnoticed because I will be your witness. Wow. So why we choose to stay in a relationship, even when the going gets tough, is because we all want a witness for our lives. Someone to be with us in the good and the bad. One of the questions I'm asked a lot as a therapist, should I stay or should I leave my relationship? And I don't want to say that I'm advocating that everybody should stay in their relationship. I don't believe that. But I do believe that if you stay in your relationship, you're going to experience hurt. But if you leave your relationship, you're also going to experience hurt. You know, in a way, no one gets out of a relationship unscathed. We all have pain and we all have hurt. So when I came up with these 12 questions, why should I stay or should I go? They are not by no means a substitute for therapy or talking to a spiritual advisor or a sponsor, but they are basically a guideline to use and to get you to start thinking about these things and maybe bring it to your sponsor or your therapist. The first question I started with, is there physical violence in your relationship? I started with that one because safety is of the utmost importance. Mia Kirschenbaum talks about how if there's abuse in a relationship more than one time, you need to leave. The reason she said one time was she gave grace that it could happen once because tempers can flare and somebody can be outside of themselves one time. I believe that if the person starts a domestic violence program and really an offenders program and works on it themselves for a year and contracts that he will not do it again, it can warrant staying. But if it happens more than once, it's going to keep happening and your self-esteem is going to plummet. So in that case, you need to leave the relationship, no questions asked. There are shelters, there are women's resource centers, but leaving and keeping yourself alive is crucial. Second question, were things ever good in your relationship? When you look back to your relationship in the early days, was there ever a good time? Do you ever have happy memories? It's easy to fix something that was broken, but it's hard to fix something that never worked in the first place. My example is when you go to buy a house. When you're looking to buy a house, you know those type of houses you go into that have ugly wallpaper on the walls and there's tacky rugs on the floor, and you're like, I can't picture myself here. But if the house has a good foundation, if it's sturdy, if it's built well, you can make some cosmetic changes. You can take down the wallpaper, you can switch out the rugs, you can even sand the floor, and you'll have a beautiful house. Now, there are those other houses that are glitzy. They may have great coat of paint and beautiful furnishing when you look at it, but there's structural damage. Is the foundation rotten? If there's termites, if there's water damage, then the core of the house is rotten. And you can't fix a house that is rotten at its core. Similar, if you don't have any good memories in your relationship, you can't fix your relationship because it's rotten at its core. Third question, do you and your partner have a couple of pleasurable activities? Are there anything that you like to do together? Do you like to go to the dog park? Do you like to play tennis or go for a walk or go hiking or lie in bed and do the crossword puzzles and have a cup of coffee? you need to have at least 2 activities together that you enjoy doing to warrant staying in a relationship. Also, do you like your partner? At the core, do you think your partner is a good person, somebody you like spending time with? Do they have the qualities of a good friend? Are you happy when you see his car at the house when you come home? Do you trust each other? All right. I know that dishonesty is a hallmark of addiction, but has that changed? Is the person's word becoming more reliable over time? Do you see her working a program and her word all of a sudden starting to mean something? Is she coming home when she says she's going to come home? Is she calling when she's supposed to? That's all important changes. If you can't believe anything out of his mouth, you have no means to stay in this relationship because you're trusting this person with your children, with your finances, and with your feelings. You can't do that with somebody you don't trust at all. Do you share core values and beliefs? So in this, do you believe similarly about religion, about politics, about raising kids? Now, not everyone is going to have every belief similar, but you need to be coming from similar playing fields. What about, do you still want to be touched by your partner? Now, with this one, I didn't say sexual. I talked about being touched because you could be angry and there could be a sexual standoff, or there could be a sex addiction, or there could be an addiction where there's been a betrayal. And in that, there may be a time for abstinence or celibacy, but it doesn't mean that the relationship is doomed. It means you're taking care of yourself. In doing that, think to yourself, do you still want to touch this person? Do you still want to hold her hand when she walks by? Do you still want to touch his hair? If you still want to touch the person, it means there's still an attraction there and there's some stuff to build on. The next one, do you and your partner usually find a way to resolve differences? Differences are going to occur in a relationship. Do you see one person silently seething, who's keeping score? Or do you look at conflicts as an opportunity to resolve differences? What about, do you both feel respected? This is important. Does one person get shut up or silenced by the other? Does one person do all the talking? If that's the case, there's a power differential going on, and that needs to be resolved to stay in a relationship. 10, do you have kids? Now, I am not saying you need to stay in a relationship if you have kids, but it's a reason to think long and hard before leaving, because you're not just going to impact the 2 of your lives, but you're going to impact several people's lives. And sometimes these people are young and defenseless, and you need to think long and hard before you make a change like that. Are you both fully invested in fighting to save your relationship? In this case, you can't fight for your relationship if you're fighting alone. Do you see that both are willing to go to couples therapy? Are both willing to go to a couples retreat or talk to your clergy? Are you willing to really look deep within yourself and work together to save your relationship? The last question I came up with was, have you cut and run before? Is this your pattern? When you get hurt, when you see your partner's imperfections, do you just leave and look for greener pastures? These are just some questions to get you started thinking about this. But there's going to be pain in any relationship you're in. The challenge is looking at this pain as an opportunity to learn. Elizabeth Gilbert, the author, said, "The women whom I love and admire for their strength and grace didn't get that way because shit worked out. They got that way because shit went wrong, and they handled it in 1,000 different ways on 1,000 different days, but they handled it. These women are my superheroes." To me, what this means is let's find lessons in the pain. Let's become superheroes. Pain has a purpose. As Martin Buber, the philosopher, says, all suffering prepares us for vision. Pain has a purpose of allowing us to want our lives to change. If we don't hurt, we don't want to change. So when things go wrong in my life, I tend to say, this is going to make me a better therapist. I coined the term AFGOs, another friggin' growth opportunity. I want to share with you an AFGO that occurred in my life. Back in 2014, I had a lot going on. My private practice had blown up. I all of a sudden had 4 therapists working for me full time. I was working full time. And I had 3 kids of various ages that I had to drive around from activity to activity. None of my kids drove at that time. I had so much on my plate. And then a friend asked me, do you want to co-chair this gala affair for charity? I had no business doing that, but I said sure, because I believed in the cause and I thought it was going to do something to try and help. And it was the middle of the week. We had to all of a sudden take care of the catering and the decorating, and I even had to give a speech at the event. It all went off seamlessly, and I felt really proud of myself. I had pulled it off in the midst of a busy working week. I came home and I was exhausted. And the next day I had taken the morning off, but had to drive my son to preschool, dropped him off, and instead of going home and going back to bed, I thought, let's try and push myself further and be perfect by going to the gym. So on my way to the gym, I was really tired, and I did not see the truck that crossed the lane. And I didn't know if I didn't react quick enough because I was tired, or if I didn't see it, or if I was just off. But it was an accident, a really bad accident. An airbag going off accident, a car totaling accident. Now, when I have problems, when things go wrong in my life, I am a talker. I'm a therapist. I talk to my friends about it. I talk to my support system. I talk to family members. Not this time. I was going through my own post-traumatic stress. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to go to bed. I wanted to hide under the covers. I felt so much shame and blame of myself. Why was I driving if I was tired? Why didn't I get somebody else to pick up my son? He could have been in the car. If it was 5 minutes earlier, he would have been killed. These thoughts were ruminating. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to get back in a car. And it took me a week or so till I could resolve all that was going on with me. But what I realized, my AFGO, was that I needed to slow down. I needed to take a lot off of my plate. I took off a good month from work that summer. I slowed down. I wasn't working as much. I also slowed down my social commitments. I didn't need to see people as much. I needed to spend more time meditating, more time being present. It's really pretty sad that it took getting hit by a truck to teach me to slow down, but it worked. It taught me that I needed to be present. Another lesson on being present happened from, I saw a video from Toni Morrison and Oprah. Oprah had interviewed Toni Morrison. And basically what she had said, Oprah had asked Toni about what kids need. And what she said, what a child needs when she looks for her mother to walk into the room, she is looking to see, is my mother's eyes sparkling? Is her face lit up? That always resonated with me. And I've done everything I can to be present when I'm with my kids, to let my eyes sparkle, to let them know I'm happy to see them. I try to do that with my husband too. So often it's important to let your eyes show happiness and gratitude that the person is in the room. Toni Morrison then led into Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou came up with 4 questions that I have in the slides. She said there are these 4 unconscious questions that everybody asks. It might not be implicitly, but but it might not be explicitly, but it's implicitly. Everybody is unconsciously asking one another these questions, whether it be your husband, your wife, your child, the woman that works in the supermarket. They want to know, do you see me? Do you care that I am here? Am I enough for you, or do you need me to be better in some way? Can I tell that I am special by the way that you look at me? How do we do that? How can we be more present? It only takes 1 second to decide to be present, to make eye contact, to smile with our eyes and smile with our face, and let the person know we're happy they're there. I learned, you can't really see, but I have my dog Rosie right next to me on the sofa. And I learned from Rosie, she's my teacher, because every time I walk in the house, Rosie is so happy to see me. She comes and she starts barking, and she comes and wags her tail. And she always answers those questions. Yes, she's happy to see me. She's very present. She doesn't hold it against me that yesterday I only took her for a 5-minute walk instead of a 20-minute walk. She doesn't hold it against me that 2 days from now, I might not give her a big enough doggy treat. She's just happy in the moment. We could all learn from Rosie. Sometimes for us, though, what gets in the way is social media and all of our screens. They keep us from being present. There was a study that was done in 2016 through the NIH and University of Pittsburgh that looks at social media use. And what they found were the people who spent the most time looking at social media were 3 times as hopeless, helpless, anxious, and depressed as the people who looked at social media the least. When I heard that study, I was like, duh. Of course, you're going to have FOMO because everybody else's lives look so wonderful and fabulous. It's really important for us to slow down our use of social media. So I want to close with talking to you one more example I have of a navigation system. Now, the reason I'm going to talk about this is because we're all going to mess up. Everything I'm talking about today, about being present, about being less critical, about letting our eyes sparkle, we're all gonna mess up and do it imperfectly. I think about it like a navigation system. For me, I always had a terrible sense of direction. Right when I learned how to drive, I couldn't even follow a map. So I would have to write out directions by hand. And I would write left turn here, right turn here. I'd even have landmarks, make a left turn at that church, just so that I wouldn't get lost. And sometimes I would still get lost and have to go to gas stations and ask for help. One of the greatest inventions of my lifetime was the navigation system, the Waze app, grateful. And with it, it tells you what to do. It tells you make the next right turn, make a left turn, and still, sometimes I mess up. It tells me to make a right turn and I make a left turn. What I love about this navigation system is that it doesn't say, you screwed up, you stupid idiot. It says, make the next right turn. No judgment, no sarcasm, and no blame. It's positive self-talk telling me to do the next right thing, which is what 12-step programs have been telling us for years. So when you mess up, remember to do the next right thing. There was a movie I loved. It's Scent of a Woman with Al Pacino. And there was this great tango scene. And in the tango scene, Al Pacino said, when you get tangoed up, tango on. When you get tangled up, tango on. And I'm going to end with one more quote. This is from the musician and poet Leonard Cohen. He said, ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That is how the light gets in.
Oh, that was great. Thank you so much. Those of you that that would like to ask Alyson a question, chat them to me, and I will read them to her. So we don't, it's recorded, so we don't let people go into the request to share. But I wrote down like this, so no, nothing personal, but I'm going to X you out. So if you have a question, chat them to me. Please do not go to the people requesting to share. So the navigation system, I was laughing because I was paying attention, but I misjudged the distance, and so I turned where I thought they told me to turn. I was in the New York area, and I ended up going over the bridges into New York City because I turned 300 feet before I should have turned. And I just was like, well, there you have it. It's like I'm doing the best I can. It got me back where I was supposed to be, but like I could have gotten completely off the wall about that, or just go, it's just life, and gosh, I got a little adventure. So I loved what you're talking about with divorce too. I think it's so easy to do the cut and run. Going back to what you said about Disney, and it's supposed to be happily ever after forever. And so the first time somebody makes me unhappy after we get connected, then I have to leave and go look for perfection somewhere else. And like you're talking about with social media too, because of course everybody else in social media has these perfect lives. That's what I'm seeing on my social media, is their life is perfect, and I must not be doing it correctly then, because I'm, and then going back to the shame and guilt and everything else too. I think we can easily internalize that shame of like, we aren't doing it right. And, then blaming it on our spouses, our children, or whatever. You need to make me look good by doing whatever it is that you're doing. So, and you talked about domestic violence too. And I want to add, there are enough men that are violated against. And so, I
Very
want
much
to be really
so.
yeah, I want to be clear,
Yes.
regardless of male or female, domestic violence is never okay. And there are
Yes.
resources, and there's probably even more shame if you're a male that's been abused. So, but there are resources, and
Yes.
don't forget to reach out, for help. So, and then pain. I was thinking, I read a quote not too long ago. There's pain to stay the same, and there's pain to change. Choose to change. But I also think it is really easy for people, particularly addicts, to go, I'm just going to avoid all that pain. I'm just going to not be in relationships. I'm going to, I'm going to not be intimately connected to anybody, because then you can't hurt me if I'm, if I don't care. So, but what they miss is that I think as humans, we are supposed to be intimately connected with people, be attached to people. And Dr. Rob shares all the time, the opposite of addiction is healthy attachment. So if we're in relationship, if we're in community, that's how we heal, that's how we grow.
I agree completely, Tammy. There's so much hurt and fear that goes on. That was why we want to hide.
Yeah. So any questions? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So if you have a question, I'd love to ask them of Alyson, Dr. Alyson. So let's talk about your book. We're going to go, it's going to be out this year. So
hopefully.
Yes,
Right
yes.
now it's perfectly imperfectly in the hands of the publishers, and I'm hoping that it is going out within the next year.
Yes.
I'm surrendering.
So, yes. And you can always reach out. So there'll be podcasts on sex, love, and addiction. There's other resources. This video will be posted on the In the Rooms. But we have like 11 more minutes. So we don't do questions through the people requesting to share, because this is recorded. So if you have a question, throw it in the chat and I will ask it. But otherwise, I think we're going to let people, anything else you want to add, I guess that would be the next question.
No, I guess just that this is a work in progress, that relationships are hard for all of us. And, normalizing that we can talk about it and we don't have to make it all look perfect, that we can be authentic and we can share that we struggle.
And I think that's such a good message for our kids to learn too, is, I learned through 12-step to own up when I make a mistake as a parent, not pretend that I didn't do that.
Yeah.
But modeling that for our kids, that we're human, we're
Yeah.
doing the best we can. We don't have to be perfect. We aren't perfect. I think that that's a gift that we can pass on for them as well. Oh, we've got a question. Yay. Thank you.
Okay. Yay.
All right. It says, I don't know how to access chat, but I'm sending a message via private. I can't see the private message because it takes me out of this room. So you did this right. So if you continue with your question, they're typing. That's exactly how you get
She
the
is
question.
good enough in how she is communicating.
Exactly. Yeah. So I see. My question is regarding sexual intimacy. Great question. Well, and in the area we work in, people mistake sexual intimacy and intimacy. So I say there's lots of sex without intimacy, and there's
You got it.
a lot of intimacy without sex. So I'm waiting for the rest of the typing, but it's coming. If there's a lack of it for years, but things are good in friendship area, how do you proceed? That's a great question.
Yeah. Well, it depends upon the person if that is okay for her. If she's able to be happy with the relationship the way it is, if enough of her needs are being met, the friendship needs, the companion needs, the trust needs, and it is okay with both of them, then it is okay. But if it's something that she's really struggling with and she's longing for more touch and more connection and more sexuality, then she's really going to need to stick up for herself and talk about it, and the value of going to a therapist to talk about it, and to upsetting the apple cart may be necessary.
So the next question is, thank you for hosting, and Dr. Nerenberg for offering time and expertise. I'm in a long-term relationship with a wonderful woman who was there for me when I needed her the most. When I overdosed, now I'm into recovery, 37 days, and trying to build that back up. Due to my lies, deceit, and deception around my drug use, which I've earned, she's now questioning whether or not I'm going to meetings when I say I am. It's frustrating for me, but I get where she's coming from. Will things get better? Keep doing what I'm doing. Thank you again. So,
yes, stick with it. This is going to take time. If you think about it, for her to be brainwashed and lied to takes time. It takes time to rebuild trust. So patience is so crucial. Giving her time, and the more that you keep doing the next right thing, the more she's going to see it. You don't have to prove it, but she's going to see when you come home at the time you're supposed to come home, when you're getting phone calls from program friends. She's going to see the evidence of the work you're doing. 37 days is very early on, so give her a chance and keep giving yourself a chance.
Yeah, great 37 days. But, we talk all the time on the sexandrelationshiphealing.com webinars too. It's time, it's repeated time of actions, not lips moving, because we've lied to ourselves and to everyone else. So it does take time to rebuild that. And at 37 days, you're not going to know what to do automatically. So lean into these groups and things. Somebody keeps trying to pop into the people requesting to share. I'm going to remind you, just chat the questions to me. I'm going to keep clicking. I apologize, but this is being recorded and we don't want people on there. So the next question is, can you ask about healthy attachment attributes?
I'm sorry, healthy attachment?
Healthy attachment attributes.
Yeah. So what is, if you want to attach to somebody, what is somebody's qualities that shows that they're worth attaching to? Are they reliable? Do they do what they say they're going to do? Are they consistent? Do they care about you over time? Are they showing up for you? It's really watching someone's behaviors. And I also think it's important to watch how somebody treats others. If somebody's kind to other people, I always looked at it, if someone was kind to waitresses, they're going to be kind to me. If somebody's kind to children and they talk about other people in a good, caring, loving manner, then they're going to be able to be attached to me. I think it's watching somebody in a whole bunch of different situations and seeing how he acts.
It's easy to put the facade on and pretend. So it really is how you act, even when you don't think anybody's seeing you. That's
it.
Who am I when no one's watching? That's important. So
exactly.
Okay. Next question. I noticed Alyson used some quotes from different literature. How important is mythology and spirituality for a relationship in order to bring some more magic into a relationship?
Well, I'm a big believer in being spiritual. Whether I'm not the most of religious of people, but I am a very spiritual person. So I think it's important. It's important to believe in something greater than ourselves, so we feel less alone. And if you're struggling with God, like a lot of people do in early recovery, it's following good, orderly direction, bringing in people, whether it be a sponsor, whether it be leaders or people you can respect. And I think you're just learning. We're all just learning.
And I know people struggle with a higher power. For me, it was really obvious. I had a higher power. It was my addiction, because I did whatever that addiction wanted me to do. There was no questioning it along the way. It was like I was driven. So for me to switch, other than getting through shame and guilt and all of that type of thing, but the greatest gift for me of the 12 steps was a higher power, and knowing I wasn't it, and my addiction wasn't it either. So that was a gift. So, okay, next question. Can you touch on friendships in transition, especially when friends get married into relationships and I am single? How do I deal with ruptures of friends not showing up like they used to, or not having the capacity due to intimate relationships, but repairing the relationships in ways that work for both parties?
What a great question. I think what she's talking about is grief and loss. When friendships move on, I think sometimes the loss of a friendship isn't talked about enough, but it really hurts. We grieve when somebody doesn't seem to need us as much. All of a sudden, your friend is enamored with her new partner and spending time with that person, and you're struggling. What am I going to do? This is somebody I used to go to a lot of meetings with and connections, and I meet for meals, and now I'm alone. And there's a core sense of loneliness and grieving it as we go through the stages of loss. This is something that was really important to you. And talking about it is important with the friend, and also adjusting and finding other people to try and fill some of those roles. But it is definitely a loss, the loss of a deep friendship.
Yeah, and it is challenging. And I think, I'm older. I've had transitions in my life, and people that were near and dear to me at some point, for a variety of reasons, our lives moved in different directions. And but then I've also got some friends that, we don't see each other as often. We stay a little bit connected, but when we see each other, it's like we've lost no space. So understanding that every relationship, goes through seasons as well. But yeah, a lot of grief, but also look for how can you expand, other relationships to fill some of those voids. So, okay, next question. I have an avoidant attachment style, and tend to be avoidant in relationships and not be emotionally open with others. Everyone keeps asking me to be more real and share more of my feelings, but it seems that often when I try to share, people get upset at what I'm sharing, or feel it's too much for them and turn away from the relationship. I don't know. I know I'm not doing it perfectly yet, as I'm just starting to change, but I'm trying my best. So.
I love the last part of that, but I'm trying my best, and that is okay. The more you keep showing up in the rooms, the more you keep going to meetings, and you keep trying people on, it's going to get easier. So I'm really glad, when you think about it, avoidant attachment styles basically were people who were hurt in childhood. And so it's hard to start trusting other people, and it's hard to let yourself be seen. So baby steps. You can take little steps by, reaching out to somebody, talking to somebody after a meeting, talking to somebody, making a phone call. Baby steps.
Yeah, and I honor you for continuing to try. I mean, like you said, I'm trying. Great, continue to try. It gets easier. Don't. Uh, Try not to feel that it's personal. And I think if you can find some people that that are in, that you're willing to be vulnerable with, ask them, this is new for me. How can you encourage me? How can you show me how to do it differently, that might be more amenable, so to speak? I mean, we all have to learn, and there's a learning curve with everything. So, okay. Last question. I'm 35 and continue to fail to build healthy relationships. I'm not in touch with any of my biological family. I live alone, no pets, and just celebrated 5 years sober. I recently stopped going to the house of the gentleman I was dating for 9 months after a lot of cold behavior, misconnections, pot use, and then him telling me I'm over emotional and to get the F out. I feel like I'm doing it wrong and I'm back to isolating. What can I do when I feel so stuck?
I hear a lot of loneliness in that. And first, I want to commend you for what you're doing right. You've got 5 years in recovery. That's amazing. So you obviously have a lot of strengths and a lot of skills. But I'm hearing the rejection and the loss that the relationship didn't work out. Keep showing up, keep being present. You're going to meet other people and have other relationships in your life.
Yeah, and I have interests, and I met people that shared interests, and it didn't have to be, a romantic relationship. It was just building friendships. For example, I like to hike, and so going on a hike with others who like to hike is something that is joyful for me and a point of connection. We don't have to have lots of other things in common, but if we're hiking and enjoying nature and things like that, that's a point of connection. So are there some activities or something that you would like to do, perhaps that that you go, gosh, I've never been able to do that because I was in my addiction or whatever, where you go, just dipping your toe in that way might be another point of connection. So we are out of time. So in an hour, John Taylor is going to be talking about don't wait till you're fixed. So you see the theme here about relationships. So keep coming back. In an hour, I'll see if this is recorded. Alyson, so great to see you. Thank you so much for sharing. I can't wait for your book because it's going to come out this year. So
Thank you. Thanks,
everybody. See you
I
in an
really
hour.
enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.